Red Bull's radical RB22 upgrade may have exposed the one weapon every rival fears before Spa. And it is not just more power. After Max Verstappen pointed to two separate problems with the car following an especially painful qualifying session, telemetry from Silverstone revealed that Red Bull's weakness was deeper than one bad lap. The car was losing performance in ways that could not be solved by a simple setup change. Now, before one of the fastest and most demanding circuits in Formula One, Red Bull may finally have an answer. Spa stretches for more than 7 kilometers. It combines long flat-out sections, violent elevation changes, high-speed corners, heavy braking, and almost no room for instability. A car that is strong in one area can still be brutally exposed somewhere else. But Red Bull's possible internal combustion engine advantage adds a dangerous new layer. Because if the RB22 upgrade has improved the car's balance, helped it use its power more effectively, and reduced the problems Verstappen identified, Red Bull has not simply created a faster machine. It has created a complete weapon. And the detail rivals fear most is not the performance Red Bull has added. It is the performance Red Bull may have stopped losing. To understand why this matters, you have to start with the uncomfortable truth Red Bull could no longer hide. The RB22 was not dealing with one obvious weakness. Max Verstappen had already pointed to two separate problems after a particularly painful qualifying session, and telemetry analysis from Silverstone raised even more concern about how the car was behaving when it reached the limit. That distinction is critical. One problem can sometimes be managed. The driver changes a braking point. The engineers adjust the setup. The team accepts a small loss in one corner to recover time somewhere else. Two problems can trap the entire car. Fix the front, and the rear may become harder to control. Protect the rear, and the car may refuse to turn. Reduce drag for the straights, and the driver may lose confidence through the fastest corners. Add more grip, and the car may sacrifice the speed it needs to attack or defend. Suddenly, every solution creates another compromise. And Spa has a brutal way of exposing exactly that kind of weakness. The circuit stretches for more than 7 kilometers, but the length is only part of the challenge. Spa feels like several different tracks forced into one lap. There are long sections where the car must cut through the air with as little resistance as possible. Then, only moments later, the driver needs stability, grip, and complete confidence through corners taken at enormous speed. The car climbs. It drops. It compresses. It becomes light over changes in elevation. Then it has to slow down, rotate, and deliver power cleanly onto another acceleration zone. Every weakness returns. Every compromise becomes visible. And one small problem can infect the entire lap. A nervous corner entry can force the driver to brake earlier. That weaker entry changes the line through the corner. The poor line delays the throttle. The delayed throttle reduces speed all the way down the straight. What looked like one small balance issue has now damaged several seconds of performance. That is why Red Bull's upgrade cannot be judged by one new component. The real question is whether the package changes the chain reaction. Because a Formula One car does not behave like a collection of separate pieces. Everything is connected. The front of the car shapes the airflow reaching the middle. The middle influences what reaches the rear. The rear affects traction, confidence, and how early the driver can use the engine's power. One weakness can reduce the value of every strength around it. And one effective improvement can do the opposite. This is where the possible engine advantage becomes so important. The available information points toward discussion of an internal combustion engine strength for Red Bull, but it does not confirm a specific power figure or guaranteed gain. That matters, because raw engine performance alone does not solve everything. A stronger engine cannot rescue a poor corner exit. It cannot stop the rear tires from sliding. It cannot give the driver confidence if the car moves unpredictably under braking. And it cannot fully overcome an aerodynamic package creating too much resistance. Power becomes dangerous only when the rest of the car allows it to be used. Think of a powerful runner wearing shoes with no grip. The strength is there. The speed is there. But every step wastes energy. Give that runner stability, and suddenly the same power produces a completely different result. That may be the real purpose of Red Bull's Spa package. Not simply adding performance. Removing the losses that were preventing existing performance from reaching the track. That is a much more serious possibility. Because rivals can prepare for an obvious strength. They can reduce wing angle to protect themselves on the straights. They can build a setup around qualifying. They can focus on keeping track position. But a car that stops wasting performance becomes harder to predict. It may carry more speed through the corner. It may protect its tires more effectively. It may accelerate earlier. It may become stronger in qualifying without sacrificing the race. And each improvement can reinforce the next. That is how a normal upgrade becomes a weapon. But there is still a major problem. The source material does not reveal the exact technical changes inside the package. There is no confirmed list of new floor elements, bodywork revisions, suspension changes, or precise aerodynamic gains. So the real story cannot be one dramatic part. Not yet. The real story is the target. Red Bull appears to need a car that behaves more consistently. A car that gives Verstappen the same response at different speeds. A car that remains understandable when the fuel load changes. A car that does not force the driver to choose between front-end response and rear-end stability. Predictability may not sound spectacular. In Formula One, predictability creates speed. When the driver knows how the car will react, steering inputs become cleaner. Braking becomes more decisive. Throttle application becomes earlier. The tires slide less. And the driver begins attacking the circuit instead of waiting for the car to surprise him. That difference can be tiny in one corner. Across a lap as long as Spa, it can become significant. Across an entire race, it can decide strategy. And strategy is where the upgrade may create its biggest hidden advantage. A more stable car can reduce tire stress. Lower tire stress can extend a stint. A longer stint can give the team more flexibility around pit stops. That flexibility can protect against traffic, changing weather, or a badly timed safety car. The fastest car does not always control the race. The car with the most options often does. And Spa rarely gives teams a simple afternoon. Conditions can shift. Track temperature can move. Wind direction can change. One part of the circuit can feel different from another. A car with a narrow working range can look brilliant for one session, then become nervous when the conditions change. That is why Red Bull may be chasing something bigger than peak performance. A wider operating window. A car that works in more than one situation. Imagine balancing a glass near the edge of a table. When everything is perfect, it stays upright. But one small movement can send it falling. Move the glass toward the center, and suddenly there is room for error. That room is what Red Bull needs. Room to adjust the setup without destroying the balance. Room for the driver to attack a different line. Room for the tires to move through changing temperatures. Room for the race to become unpredictable without the car falling apart. And this is where the pressure becomes enormous. Because Red Bull will not have unlimited time to understand the package. A fast lap can be misleading. The track may improve. The wind may change. The tires may be prepared differently. Traffic may ruin one comparison and make another look better than it really is. The engineers have to separate genuine progress from temporary conditions. The driver has to decide whether the car feels more trustworthy. And both sides must reach the same conclusion. Data can show more grip. The driver can still feel less confidence. That sounds contradictory, but it is not. More performance is only useful when it arrives in a predictable way. Imagine someone helping you carry a heavy box. If they lift smoothly, the weight becomes easier to control. If they pull suddenly and then release, the same force makes the box harder to handle. Aerodynamic grip can behave in a similar way. If it builds smoothly, the driver can lean on it. If it arrives suddenly or disappears without warning, the driver leaves a margin. And at Spa, every margin costs momentum. That is why the first real sign of success may not be the fastest lap. It may be smaller steering corrections. Earlier throttle application. More consistent long runs. Fewer desperate setup changes. A driver who sounds clear instead of confused. Those clues would suggest Red Bull has not merely moved the problem. It has begun solving the relationship between the two weaknesses Verstappen identified. And if that happens, the possible engine strength becomes far more valuable. The car can arrive on the straight with a better exit. The rear tires can transfer the power more cleanly. The aerodynamic package can preserve more speed. The entire lap begins to connect. But the biggest test is still waiting. Because clean air can make almost any competitive car look impressive. The true danger appears when another car is directly ahead, disturbing the airflow, overheating the tires, and forcing Verstappen away from the perfect line. That is where Red Bull's radical upgrade will reveal whether it is simply faster, or whether it has finally become usable as a weapon. Traffic is where Red Bull's upgrade stops being a theory and becomes a weapon. In clean air, the RB22 can receive the airflow its engineers expected. The front of the car gets a cleaner stream of air. The balance becomes easier to predict. The driver can use the ideal racing line. But the moment another car appears ahead, everything changes. The airflow becomes disturbed. The front tires can lose grip. The steering can feel less precise. And the driver may be forced to wait before returning to the throttle. At Spa, that delay is brutally expensive. A poor corner exit does not only cost time at the corner. It follows the car down the entire straight. One small hesitation becomes lost momentum. One correction becomes a larger gap. and an overtaking opportunity can disappear before the attack even begins. This is why Red Bull cannot judge the upgrade only by one fast qualifying lap. The package has to make the car usable in the conditions where races are actually decided. Behind another car, on worn tires, with changing fuel loads, away from the perfect line, under pressure. And that is where the two problems Verstappen identified could become even more serious. The available information does not reveal exactly what those two problems were. But any weakness in balance becomes harder to manage in turbulent air. A front end that already feels uncertain can lose even more authority. A rear that already moves unpredictably can become more difficult to trust. And a car with a narrow operating window can suddenly fall outside that window completely. That is why the upgrade needs to provide more than extra grip. It needs to provide tolerance. Tolerance for disturbed air. Tolerance for wind changes. Tolerance for tire wear. Tolerance for the small mistakes that happen when two cars are fighting for the same piece of circuit. A more tolerant car gives the driver options. And options create pressure. If Verstappen can remain close through Spa's fastest sections, the driver ahead cannot relax. The rival may protect the inside, brake earlier, change the line, sacrifice the exit. And that defensive decision can create the opening Red Bull needs. The overtake does not begin when the car pulls out of the slipstream. It begins several corners earlier. It begins when the front tires remain alive. It begins when the rear stays stable. It begins when Verstappen trusts the car enough to avoid lifting. That is the hidden difference between a fast car and a dangerous car. A fast car produces lap time. A dangerous car changes what everyone around it is forced to do. And this is where the possible internal combustion engine advantage becomes much more important. The source material does not confirm a specific power figure. It does not prove that Red Bull will have the strongest engine at Spa. But it does point toward discussion of an advantage. And power becomes far more valuable when the car can arrive on the straight correctly. A stronger engine cannot recover everything if the corner exit is poor. It cannot help if the rear tires spin. It cannot erase the drag created by an inefficient setup. Power needs support. It needs traction. It needs balance. It needs a car that transfers every part of that performance to the road. Think of a relay race. The fastest final runner cannot win if every handover before that point is slow. The stages have to connect. Braking, turning, traction, acceleration, straight line speed. If one part breaks the sequence, the entire lap suffers. But if every stage works together, the same engine output suddenly produces a far more powerful result. That is what rivals would fear most. Not one dramatic gain. A complete chain. A Red Bull that can enter the corner with confidence, rotate without fighting the rear, accelerate without wasting grip, and then carry that momentum onto Spa's long straights. That would make the RB22 difficult to defend against. But the effect would not stop with overtaking. It would also change strategy. A car that can follow more closely may not need to rely only on pit stops to gain position. A car that slides less may protect its tires for longer. A car that preserves tire life may extend a stint. And a longer stint gives the strategists more freedom. They can wait for changing weather, react to a safety car, avoid traffic, force rivals to stop first. That freedom is often more valuable than one burst of raw pace. Because the fastest strategy is not always available to every team. It is only available to the car capable of supporting it. A team may want to extend a stint. But if the tires are overheating, that option disappears. A team may want to attack late. But if the driver has already damaged the tires while following, the attack never arrives. A team may want to stay out during changing conditions. But if the car becomes unstable as the track cools, the risk becomes too high. This is why a wider operating window matters. It creates possibilities. And possibilities make Red Bull harder to predict. Rivals study patterns. They look at when Red Bull normally stops. Where the car struggles in traffic. How quickly the tires lose performance. Whether Verstappen needs clean air to produce his best pace. But if the upgrade changes those patterns, every old assumption becomes dangerous. A rival may defend the straight, only to lose time through the corners. A team may cover an early pit stop, only for Red Bull to continue without serious tire loss. A driver may expect the RB22 to drop back in dirty air, only to find Verstappen still filling the mirrors. Uncertainty creates hesitation. And hesitation can decide a race. But there is another side to this weapon.